Hey guys, tonight we begin with something a little darker. A time of mud, misery, and mindless toil. We're diving into what life was really like for peasants during the Middle Ages. Forget the knights and princesses from your storybooks. The truth is, you probably wouldn't survive a single day as a medieval peasant, and I'll explain why today. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like this video and subscribe, but only enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're hearing this from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to me seeing who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background noise, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Congratulations, you've just woken up in the year 1245. The good news is you're alive. The bad news, your entire body aches from sleeping on a straw mattress filled with lice and bed bugs. There's no pillow, no blanket, just a rough wool sack stuffed with more. Straw that scratches your skin all night. The floor beneath you is packed dirt. Not concrete, not wood. Just dirt that turns to mud when it rains. And it rains often. Your feet are cold. They're always cold. The single-room hut you share with your entire family has no insulation. No glass in the windows, just wooden shutters that let in drafts even when closed. The walls are wattle and daub, sticks woven together and packed with mud, straw, and animal. Dung. They crack. They leak. They're home to mice and insects that you've simply learned to live with. The air inside your home is thick with smoke. There's no chimney, just a fire pit in the middle of the floor with smoke that's supposed to find its way out through a hole in the thatched roof. Sometimes it does. Mostly it doesn't. Your lungs have adapted. Your eyes are always slightly irritated. Everyone coughs. That's just normal. You don't think about it anymore. Dawn hasn't fully broken, but you're already awake. There's no sleeping in. Not when there's work to be done. Not when survival depends on constant labor. Your stomach growls. It always growls. You're never quite full. Never quite starved. Just existing in that gray area of persistent hunger that shapes every decision, every thought, every moment of your day. You reach for your clothes, the same clothes you wore yesterday, and the day before, and last week. You own exactly 2 sets of clothing, one for work, one for church. Both are made of rough wool or linen that you or your family members spun and wove yourselves. The fabric scratches against your skin. There's no cotton, no silk, nothing soft, nothing comfortable. Just functional garments that protect you from the elements. Barely. Your shoes, if you're fortunate enough to have them, are simple leather with wooden soles, secured with straps. They're never quite the right size. They leak when it rains. They wear through quickly with the miles of walking each day. Many of. Your neighbors go barefoot for most of the year, their feet calloused and tough like leather. Your morning routine doesn't include bathing. That's a rare luxury reserved for special occasions, perhaps once every few months. There's no bathroom, no running water, just a wooden bucket in the corner for night needs, which someone will empty into the midden heap behind the house. The smell doesn't bother you anymore. It's just the background scent of life. Breakfast, if you can call it that, is a piece of dark bread and perhaps some thin porridge made from whatever grain was most abundant after the last harvest. Rye, barley, oats, not wheat. Wheat is for the Lord's table, not yours. The bread is dense, slightly sour, and contains bits of grit from the millstone that slowly wear down your teeth over time. You wash it down with small beer, a weak alcoholic brew that's safer to drink than the water from the nearby stream. The water carries disease. Everyone knows this, though no one knows why. They just know that people who drink from the stream often fall ill and die. So you drink beer. Even the children drink beer. It's not strong enough to cause drunkenness. It's just what you drink to stay alive. Your daily tasks depend on the season. It's early spring now, so the fields need preparing. You gather your tools, a wooden hoe with an iron tip, a simple spade. These tools are precious. The metal parts cost money you barely have. You've inherited them from your father, who inherited them from his father. You maintain them carefully, knowing that without them, you cannot work. Without work, you cannot eat. Without eating, you cannot live. It's a simple equation that governs every aspect of your existence. You step outside your hut into the common area of the village. Other peasants are emerging from their homes, just as tired, just as hungry, just as resigned to another day of endless toil. There's no weekend coming, no vacation, no retirement, just work until you're too old or sick to continue, and then dependence on your children until death finally claims you. The village is small, perhaps 30 households arranged around a central green where animals sometimes graze. Beyond the village lie the fields, the Lord's fields, though you work them as if they were your own, because in a way, they are your food source, your livelihood, your entire economy wrapped up in strips of land that have been farmed the same way for centuries. As you walk to the fields, your wooden shoes or bare feet navigate the muddy path, by memory. The mud is everywhere in spring, sometimes ankle deep, sometimes deeper. It clings to everything: clothes, tools, animals, children. It's not just dirt and water. It's mixed with human waste, animal dung, rotting plants. The ground itself is a breeding ground for disease that no one understands, but everyone fears. Your first task today is to spread manure on the fields. Not store-bought fertilizer in tidy bags. Real manure that you've been collecting all winter, from your animals, your family, your neighbors. You carry it in baskets, in hands, in whatever containers can be spared. The smell is overwhelming to modern senses, but to you, it's just the smell of farming, of growing, of survival. You spread it with bare hands and crude tools, working it into soil that has been depleted by generations of constant farming. The field you're working is part of the open field system. Long, narrow strips of land that seem chaotic to modern eyes but make perfect sense to you. Each family has strips scattered throughout the village lands. Some good soil, some bad soil. Some sunny spots, some shady. It's a primitive form of risk management. If disease or pests hit one area, perhaps your other strips will survive. You don't own these strips, not really. The Lord owns the land. You simply have the right to work certain pieces of it. A right passed down through generations of your family. A right that can be revoked if you fail in your obligations. Your obligations are many. You owe the Lord labor on his personal fields. You owe him a portion of everything you grow on your strips. You owe the church a tithe of your meager harvest. You owe community labor to maintain roads, bridges, the mill, the church. Each obligation takes time away from your own subsistence, pushing you closer to that line between hunger and starvation. As the sun climbs higher, your stomach growls again. There's no lunch break, no water cooler, no coffee shop. Just continuous. Work punctuated by moments when you straighten your aching back. Wipe the sweat from your brow with a filthy sleeve. And perhaps take a swig from the leather flask of small beer you've brought with you. Maybe you have another piece of that dense. Bread in a pocket, now covered in lint and dirt. You eat it anyway. Calories are calories, and you need every one. The weirdest thing about your survival isn't any single practice or habit. It's the totality of your existence, the complete absence of privacy, of comfort, of options. You share your one-room home with parents, grandparents, siblings, your own children if you have them. You sleep together, eat together, eliminate waste in view of one another. Bodily functions aren't embarrassing because privacy isn't a concept that exists in your world. Everyone has fleas and lice. Everyone scratches, everyone smells. It's just the background condition of being human. Your teeth are already beginning to rot, and you're barely into adulthood. Dental care consists of perhaps rubbing them with a cloth or using a twig as a toothpick. When a tooth hurts badly enough, it might be pulled by the village wise woman or the barber who passes through. Occasionally, there's no anesthetic except perhaps strong alcohol, if you can afford it. Most people are missing multiple teeth by their 30s. Some have none left at all. Your medicine is a strange mix of herbal knowledge, religious ritual, and superstition. When illness strikes, you might be bled to release bad humors. You might drink concoctions of herbs that sometimes help, sometimes harm, and sometimes do nothing at all. You might wear amulets or say prayers or make offerings to saints. Against the major killers, plague, smallpox, childbed fever, you have no defense except luck and perhaps a strong constitution. A simple cut can kill you if it becomes infected. A winter cough can become pneumonia that takes your life in days. The very act of childbirth is so dangerous that pregnant women often prepare for death by confessing sins and making arrangements for their children. As you work the field, you notice one of the village children with a distended belly. Not from plenty, but from malnutrition and intestinal parasites. Nearly everyone has worms. They live inside you, consuming some of the limited nutrition from your already inadequate diet. Periodically, you might take harsh herbal preparations to expel them, suffering through violent diarrhea that leaves you weak but temporarily relieved of some of your invisible internal companions. Your diet is bizarrely limited by modern standards. In good times, it consists primarily of bread, porridge, occasional vegetables, and very rarely meat. The Lord hunts deer in the forest, but you are forbidden to do so. Poaching carries severe penalties, loss of a hand, or even death. So your protein comes mainly from eggs when the chickens are laying, milk when the cow or goat is producing, and perhaps small animals like squirrels or rabbits that you can snare without being caught. You preserve food not because it's a quaint hobby, but because winter will absolutely bring starvation if you don't. You dry, salt, ferment, and pickle anything that can be stored. Cabbage becomes sauerkraut. Milk becomes cheese. Meat, if you have it, is salted or smoked. Many of these preservation methods alter the flavor significantly, creating foods that would taste strange or unpleasant to modern palates. But to you, these strong flavors are simply what food tastes like. One of the stranger survival practices you engage in is gleaning. After the harvest of the Lord's fields, the poorest members of the village, often widows, orphans, or the disabled, are allowed to walk the stubble and collect any remaining grains that were missed. It's backbreaking work for a meager return, but it might mean the difference between life and death during the winter months. You've done it yourself in bad years, bending for hours under the hot sun, searching for individual grains of barley or rye, collecting them one by one in a small pouch. Another odd practice is the gathering of unusual food sources during hard times. In late winter or early spring, when stored food runs low but new crops haven't yet grown, you might resort to collecting tree bark, which can be ground and mixed with the last of the flour to make a bitter but filling bread. You might dig for roots and tubers that are barely edible but provide some sustenance. You might collect nettles, dandelions, and other wild plants that modern people consider weeds, but that you know contain vital nutrients. Your clothes are patched and repatched until the original fabric is barely visible. Nothing is wasted. A garment might begin as an adult's tunic, be cut down to clothe a child as it wears thin, then eventually become patches for other garments, and finally end up as rags for cleaning or bandages for wounds. Cloth is valuable. Its production requires countless hours of labor, growing the flax or tending the sheep, harvesting, processing the fibers, spinning, weaving, sewing. A single shirt represents weeks of work. The Lord of your manor has announced that tomorrow you'll be required to help clear a new field on the edge of the forest. It means a day away from your own strips of land, a day when your own crops won't be tended. But you have no choice. This is part of your obligation, your labor service. You'll join the other villagers at dawn, bringing your own tools, your own food for the day. The Lord won't feed you while you work his land. That's not part of the arrangement. As the sun begins to sink lower in the sky, you trudge back to the village. Tools over your shoulder, back aching, hands raw. Your day isn't over. There are animals to tend, repairs to make to your home, perhaps some spinning or weaving to do by the dim light of the fire. Rush lights, made from reeds dipped in animal fat, provide poor illumination for evening tasks, and they're used sparingly. Fat is too valuable to burn without good reason. Dinner is similar to breakfast. More bread, perhaps some dried. Beans rehydrated and cooked into a soup, flavored with an herb from the small garden plot near your house and a precious pinch of salt. Salt is expensive, traded for at markets or obtained from coastal areas. Without refrigeration, it's one of the few ways to preserve food for winter. You use it carefully, making every grain count. After eating, there might be a brief period of rest. Stories told around the fire, songs sung, simple games played with pebbles or sticks. Your entertainment doesn't come from outside sources. There are no books in your home. You can't read anyway. No instruments except perhaps a simple flute or drum. You create your own amusements with whatever is at hand. Before sleep, you check the fire, banking it carefully to last through the night. Fire is life. It cooks your food, warms your home, keeps predators away. Starting a new fire isn't impossible, but it's labor-intensive, requiring a fire striker, if you're fortunate enough to own one, or the friction method using a bow drill. Either way, it's far easier to keep an existing fire going than to start a new. Some families maintain the same. Fire for years, never letting it go out completely. As you settle onto your straw mattress, pulling the rough wool cover over you, your body aches from the day's labor. But there's also a certain satisfaction. You've survived another day. Your fields are a little more prepared for planting. Your family has eaten, if not well, then at least enough to keep going. Tomorrow will bring more of the same. Endless work, minimal reward, the constant edge of hunger. But it's the only life you know. One of the strangest aspects of medieval peasant survival was the constant presence of death. It wasn't hidden, away in hospitals or funeral homes. It happened in the home, in the fields, in full view. Children died frequently, perhaps 1 in 3 before the age of 5. Women died in childbirth. Men died from accidents, infections, warfare. The elderly faded away from what would now be treatable conditions. Death was so common that it bred a kind of familiarity that modern people would find disturbing. Graves were reused, bodies decomposed, bones were collected and stored in ossuaries. Buildings or walls filled with the skeletal remains of the community's ancestors. You might walk past the skulls and femurs of your grandparents on your way to church. This wasn't seen as morbid. It was simply practical. Land was too valuable to dedicate large areas solely to the dead. Your concept of cleanliness would be almost unrecognizable to modern people. You might go months without immersing your entire body in water. Instead, you practice what's now called a sponge bath, wiping the most offensive dirt from visible areas of your body. Your hair is rarely washed. Instead, it might be covered. Women with veils or wimples, men with hats or hoods. Lice are combated by shaving, for men and sometimes women, or by using combs specifically designed to remove nits and adult insects. The smell of unwashed bodies is the background scent of human gathering. Church, markets, festivals, all carry this human musk that everyone shares. It's not offensive to you because it's universal. Only the very wealthy have the resources, the water, the fuel to heat it, the servants to carry it, for regular bathing. Your toilet is a pit dug behind the house or a bucket emptied onto the midden heap. In larger towns, human waste might be collected by night soil men, who then sell it to farmers as fertilizer. In your village, it simply becomes part of the general decomposing mass that surrounds human habitation. The concept of germs doesn't exist. The connection between waste and disease isn't understood, though there is some intuitive avoidance of the most obvious contamination. The rules governing your life are a strange mixture of practical necessity, religious doctrine, and ancient custom. You observe church holidays, dozens of them throughout the year, not just as religious obligations but as rare opportunities for rest and community celebration. Saints' days, Christmas, Easter, and various local observances create a rhythm to the year that breaks up the otherwise endless cycle of agricultural labor. But these celebrations also have a darker, practical purpose. They help control food consumption during critical periods. Fish is eaten on Fridays and during Lent, not just because of religious rules, but because it preserves breeding stocks of livestock. Feast days often align with harvest times or slaughtering, periods when certain foods are briefly abundant and need to be consumed before they spoil. Your belief system is a curious blend of official Christianity and older pagan practices that never quite died out. You might leave a saucer of milk for the good folk, while also attending Mass regularly. You might wear a cross around your neck alongside an ancient fertility symbol. The church officially condemns such superstitions, but local priests often turn a blind eye, recognizing that these practices are deeply embedded in rural life. Disease is perhaps the most terrifying aspect of your existence, not just because of the suffering and death it brings, but because of its incomprehensibility. The Black Death, bubonic plague, arrives periodically, killing seemingly at random. Your explanation for it combines miasma theory, bad air, divine punishment, and perhaps malevolent magic. The actual cause, fleas carried by rats, is completely unknown to you. When plague comes, some villages lose half their population or more. Bodies are collected by carts, buried in mass graves. Those who survive often inherit land from deceased relatives, temporarily improving their economic situation. A grim silver lining to an otherwise devastating event. This pattern of catastrophic population decline, followed by economic opportunity for survivors, is a strange cycle that repeats throughout the medieval period. Your relationship with the natural world is both more intimate and more adversarial than that of modern humans. You know the plants around your village in great detail, which are edible, which are medicinal, which are poisonous. You understand the behavior patterns of local animals, both wild and domestic. But nature is not romanticized. It's a source of essential resources and constant threats. Wolves still prowl the forests of Europe, occasionally taking livestock or even children. Wild boars can kill an unwary human. Bears, while increasingly rare, still exist in remote areas. Even deer can be dangerous during rutting season. The forest, while necessary for gathering firewood, hunting small game, and collecting wild foods, is approached with caution and respect. Weather dominates your existence in a way that modern people, sheltered by solid buildings and advanced warning systems, can hardly comprehend. A late frost can kill seedlings and lead to famine. A too wet summer can cause grain to rot in the fields. A drought can wither crops before harvest. There are no safety nets, no crop insurance, no government assistance. When weather destroys food sources, people starve. You track the seasons, not by calendar dates, but by natural signs and church festivals. Planting begins when certain trees leaf out or when particular migratory birds return. Harvest starts when grain reaches a specific color and texture. Each agricultural task has its traditional time, passed down through generations of observation and experience. The Lord's mill is both essential to your survival and a source of resentment. You are required to grind your grain there, paying a portion to the miller, and by extension to the Lord who owns the mill. Hand grinding is prohibited. Not because it's inefficient, though it is, but because it deprives the Lord of his due. Some peasants grind in secret using small hand querns, risking punishment if discovered. The strangest survival strategies emerge during times of famine. When crops fail completely, communities turn to increasingly desperate measures. Bread might be bulked out with sawdust or ground acorns. People might consume the leather of their shoes or belts after boiling them to make them somewhat chewable. They might eat their seed grain, dooming the next year's crop but staying alive in the moment. During these periods, infanticide sometimes occurs, a horrifying choice made by parents who cannot feed the children they already have. Abandonment is more common, with children left at church doors or monasteries in hopes that religious institutions might have resources to keep them alive. The psychological toll of this precarious existence is difficult to comprehend from a modern perspective. You live with a level of uncertainty that would be considered unbearable today. Will you eat next winter? Will your children survive to adulthood? Will war or plague sweep through your region? These aren't abstract concerns, but immediate, daily realities. Yet, alongside this uncertainty exists a strange kind of security. Your place in society is fixed. Your role is clear. The same family networks and village relationships that sometimes feel suffocating also provide a safety net of mutual obligation and assistance. If your house burns, the village helps rebuild it. If you're injured, neighbors help with your harvest. If you're orphaned, the community absorbs you into other households. It's not charity as we understand it today, but a system of reciprocal obligations that everyone knows they might need themselves someday. Your understanding of the wider world is limited by your inability to travel far from your village and by the absence of written information. News comes from travelers, merchants, pilgrims, occasionally soldiers. It's often outdated, distorted, or completely false. You might hear of remarkable events in distant places: comets, earthquakes, the birth of royal heirs, months or years after they occur. Your sense of geography extends perhaps to the nearest market town, and vaguely beyond that to the concept of other countries. Jerusalem exists as a holy city from Scripture. Rome is the seat of the Pope, but the actual layout of the world, the existence of distant continents, the true shape of the earth, these are either unknown to you or understood through a mixture of religious teaching and folklore. Time moves differently in your world. Without clocks, you measure the day by the position of the sun, dividing it roughly into morning, midday, afternoon, evening, and night. More precise divisions come from church bells, which ring for canonical hours: matins, prime, terce, sext, none, vespers, compline. Even if you don't attend services at each of these times, the bells create a rhythm to the day that everyone follows. Years are tracked by significant events rather than numbers. You might remember that something happened, the year of the Great Flood, or 2 harvests, after the king's visit. Your own age is approximate at best. Few people know exactly how old they are. It's simply not important information in a world where the natural progression of life stages matters more than numerical age. One of the strangest aspects of medieval survival is the practice of infantilizing adults who cannot care for themselves. Those with cognitive disabilities or severe mental illness are treated as perpetual children, given simple tasks, watched over by family members, sometimes restrained for their own safety or the community's. There are no institutions for such individuals. They remain within the family unit, contributing what they can to survival. Physical disability is approached pragmatically. If you can work, you work, adapting as necessary. A one-armed man might become a shepherd, needing only one hand for a staff. A one-legged woman might specialize in seated tasks like spinning or weaving. Only those completely unable to contribute are reduced to begging, and even then, they're expected to offer prayers for their benefactors, a spiritual contribution in exchange for material support. Your relationship with animals is utilitarian, but not necessarily cruel. Livestock are valuable assets, treated with care because their survival means your survival. Work animals, oxen, horses, donkeys, receive the best care you can provide, because without them, human labor alone must replace their power. Cats are kept for rodent control, dogs for herding and protection. But the modern concept of pets as companions is largely absent. Animals serve functions, and emotional attachment, while it certainly exists, is secondary. Horses are mainly for the wealthy. As a peasant, you're more likely to use oxen for field work. Slower but stronger, cheaper to maintain, and edible at the end of their working lives. You walk most places you go. A journey of 20 miles might take you 2 days on foot, a significant undertaking that requires planning and places you at risk from bandits or simple mishaps like sprained ankles far from help. The rhythm of your year follows the agricultural cycle. The hungry gap of late winter and early spring, when stored food runs low but new crops aren't ready, is the most dangerous time. By midsummer, some fresh foods become available. Early vegetables, milk, eggs, easing the constant pressure of scarcity. Autumn brings harvest, the busiest and most crucial period, when the success or failure of the entire year's work becomes apparent. Winter is for indoor work, repairing tools, spinning, weaving, preserving the last of the autumn slaughter. The winter solstice, Christmas to you, though with many pre-Christian elements still attached, is a rare, bright spot in the darkest time of year. Traditions vary by region, but might include special foods saved for this occasion, songs, games, a brief relaxation of the usual social hierarchies. The Yule log burns, symbolizing the return of light and warmth. For a few days, even in the depths of winter scarcity, there is celebration. Spring brings renewed work in the fields, but also renewed hope. Lambing season provides the first fresh meat in months. Wild greens offer vital nutrients after a winter of preserved foods. The religious observance of Easter coincides with this natural rebirth, creating a powerful association between spiritual and physical renewal. Your clothing changes minimally with the seasons. In winter, you simply wear more layers of the same basic garments. Perhaps you have a cloak of heavier wool. Your head is nearly always covered. Men with hats or hoods, women with veils or wimples, partially for warmth, partially for religious propriety, partially for practical concerns like keeping lice contained and sun off in summer. The colors of your clothing are limited by the available natural dyes. Browns, tans, grays, and off-whites predominate. Brighter colors, blues from woad, yellows from weld, reds from madder, require more processing and are often reserved for special garments or for the wealthy. Pattern is created by weaving techniques rather than prints. Embroidery, if present at all, is minimal and functional, reinforcing stress points in the fabric. Your home is sparsely furnished. A table, perhaps some stools or benches, a chest for storage of valuable items. Most activities take place on the floor, on the packed earth that serves as your foundation. Beds might be just pallets that are rolled up during the day to save space. The modern concept of a house full of specialized furniture is completely foreign to your experience. Light is precious. The sun dictates your schedule because working after dark requires consuming valuable resources. Rush lights, tallow candles, precious oil. These illuminations are saved for essential tasks or special occasions. Most peasant households sit in near darkness after sunset, perhaps with just the glow of the hearth fire providing minimal light for necessary evening activities. Fuel for heating and cooking is a constant concern. Wood must be gathered, often from strictly controlled areas where taking too much or the wrong kinds of wood can result in fines. In some regions, peat is cut from bogs, dried, and burned. Dried dung is used where other fuels are scarce. The labor of fuel gathering falls disproportionately on women and children, adding to their already considerable workload. Water, despite being essential for life, is often dangerous. Wells might be contaminated by nearby waste disposal. Streams carry runoff from upstream communities. Knowledge of boiling for purification is limited and fuel-intensive. So you drink small beer or watered wine if you can afford it, or milk when available. Pure water is rarely your beverage of choice. Your relationship with the church is complex. The institution demands a tithe, a tenth of your produce, which creates hardship. Individual priests may be corrupt or neglectful. Yet the church also provides the framework for communal life, the rhythm of the year, the explanation for suffering, and the hope for something better after death. It offers literacy and learning, even if you personally cannot access these. It provides care for orphans and the destitute when family networks fail. Like many aspects of medieval life, it is both burden and support. The most alien aspect of your existence might be your relationship with authority. You are not a citizen with rights. You are a subject with obligations. The lord of the manor has legal jurisdiction over most aspects of your life. He can fine you, punish you, even execute you for certain offenses. You cannot leave the manor without permission. You cannot marry without approval. Your children inherit your obligations along with your land rights. Yet this relationship also includes protections. The Lord is obligated to defend you from outside, threats, to maintain order, to ensure justice of a sort. These obligations aren't enforced by any higher power. A lord who abuses his people faces only the practical consequences of decreased productivity or potential rebellion. But they're recognized as part of the social contract. Your concept of justice would seem bizarre by modern standards. Trials might include ordeal by fire or water, forcing the accused to carry a hot iron or be submerged in water, with the resulting burns or drowning interpreted as divine judgment. Oaths hold tremendous power, with an individual's word backed by their understanding that false swearing damns their immortal soul. Punishment aims not at rehabilitation, but at restitution, deterrence, and sometimes simple vengeance. Family structures extend beyond the nuclear unit. Households often include multiple generations and sometimes more distant relatives as well. Children are fostered out to other families as apprentices or servants. The elderly remain integrated in family life until death, contributing what labor they can and passing down knowledge to younger generations. The modern Western concept of the independent individual would seem strange and lonely to you. Marriage is primarily an economic arrangement, though personal compatibility is certainly desired. Marriages create alliances between families, consolidate. Landholdings ensure care for the elderly and provide the labor force of children. Romantic love, while it might develop within marriage, is not its primary purpose. Couples often work together for years before saving enough to establish their own household and marry. Children enter the workforce early, beginning with simple tasks around age 5 or 6 and taking on increasingly significant responsibilities as they grow. By 12 or 13, they work almost adult schedules. Education, if it exists at all, is practical. The skills needed for their expected adult roles, passed down through observation and gradually increased participation rather than formal. Instruction. The concept of childhood as a protected period of play and exploration barely exists. Children are simply small adults with less strength and experience, expected to contribute to family survival from the moment they're capable of useful work. This isn't seen as exploitation, but as necessary preparation for the harsh realities of peasant life. Play does exist, snatched in moments between work. Children fashion dolls from corn husks or sticks, play simple chasing or hiding games, imitate adult activities in miniature. Adults enjoy wrestling matches, crude ball games, competitions of skill or strength, Music, dance, and storytelling enliven community gatherings. But leisure as a significant portion of life is unknown. It's an occasional respite, not an expectation. Perhaps the strangest survival practice is the acceptance of a level of discomfort that would be considered intolerable today. You are never truly warm in winter or cool in summer. Some part of your body always aches. Hunger is a familiar companion. Minor illnesses and injuries are ignored until they become debilitating. Fleas bite, smoke, stings your eyes, your feet are wet, your back hurts. These aren't emergencies to be remedied, but simply the background conditions of existence. Your immune system, constantly challenged by a microbial environment free from modern sanitation, develops differently from that of contemporary humans. You've survived numerous infections that would receive antibiotic treatment today. Your gut hosts a complex ecology of organisms, some beneficial, some parasitic, achieving a kind of balance that allows you to function despite constant low-grade disease. Your teeth tell the story of your diet and health. They're worn down by the grit in stone-ground flour. They're stained from foods and remedies. They decay without care, becoming sources of chronic pain and potentially life-threatening infection. Missing teeth affect your speech, your ability to eat certain foods. Eventually, your facial structure as bone resorbs following tooth loss. Sleep patterns differ from the modern ideal of 8 uninterrupted hours. You might sleep in 2 phases: a first sleep, soon after darkness falls, then a wakeful period of an hour or 2 used for quiet activities or reflection, followed by a second sleep until dawn. This biphasic pattern fits the extended darkness of winter and the practical limitations of artificial light. One of the most alien aspects of medieval peasant life is the nearly complete absence of privacy, not just in physical space shared with family and sometimes livestock, but in the community knowledge of nearly every aspect of your existence. Neighbors know when you argue with your spouse, when your child is disciplined, when you relieve yourself, when you engage in marital relations. The idea of a private self, separate from community observation and judgment, barely exists. Yet, within this fishbowl existence, you maintain certain boundaries. Conversations cease when strangers approach. Coded language develops to discuss sensitive matters in public. Physical privacy is created momentarily by turning away, using clothing as a shield, or simply by mutual agreement to pretend not to notice certain activities. These small courtesies make the intimacy of village life bearable. Your sense of time is both more immediate and more extended than that of modern people. The daily and seasonal cycles are intensely present. The position of the sun, the growth, stage of crops, the temperature of the air matter in immediate, practical ways. But you also exist within a multi-generational continuity that stretches backward and forward beyond your own lifespan. You farm the same land your grandparents farmed. Your grandchildren will farm it after you. This creates a different relationship with both past and future than the often disconnected experience of contemporary life. The medieval peasant concept of self differs fundamentally from modern individualism. You understand yourself primarily as a member of various groups: your family, your village, your parish, your guild, if you have specialized skills. Your identity is relational rather than internal. You are someone's child, someone's parent, someone's neighbor, a member of a community with specific obligations and entitlements. The modern question, who am I, really, deep down, would seem strange and possibly meaningless. Your emotional life is no less complex than that of modern humans, but it's expressed and processed differently. Grief is publicly performed through ritualized mourning practices. Anger has sanctioned outlets in certain festivals or community events. Joy is communal, shared in celebrations that mark successful harvests or religious observances. The modern emphasis on emotional self-awareness and articulation is replaced by traditional expressions that channel feelings into culturally recognized forms. The physical toll of peasant life writes itself on your body. Women's hips show evidence of multiple childbirths. Men's skeletons reveal patterns of repetitive stress from specific agricultural tasks. Everyone's knees and backs bear the signs of lives spent in constant physical labor. Healed fractures, often imperfectly set, create permanent deformities. By 40, if you've survived that long, your body might appear elderly by modern standards, worn down by decades of hard use and minimal rest. Disease leaves its marks as well. Childhood illnesses like measles or smallpox, if survived, might leave scars or more serious lasting effects such as blindness or hearing loss. Nutritional deficiencies create distinctive patterns: rickets bowing the legs, scurvy affecting the gums and skin, goiter swelling the neck. These physical manifestations of health history are visible signals of your life experience, readable by your contemporaries in ways that modern people, accustomed to treating and hiding such conditions, might not recognize. Your senses develop differently in this environment. Your sense of smell distinguishes subtle variations that would be masked in the artificially scented modern world. Your hearing attunes to distant animal sounds, approaching weather, the specific cadence of different church bells. Your sense of touch identifies grain readiness, wool quality, the health of livestock. Your taste detects spoilage or contamination that might cause illness. These sensory adaptations are crucial survival skills, not just incidental differences. The medieval understanding of the human body combines practical observation, religious teaching, and ancient medical theories. Illness is explained through the four humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, yellow bile, whose balance determines health. Treatments aim to restore this balance through diet, herbs, bleeding, purging, or sweating. Some of these approaches occasionally help by chance. Many do nothing. Some actively harm. But they provide a framework for understanding and responding to the otherwise terrifying randomness of disease. Your world is populated by invisible forces. Not just the Christian God, angels, and saints, but a vast ecology of beings that modern thinking has largely dismissed. Fairies, elves, goblins, spirits of place and element. These aren't mere superstition, but part of your explanatory framework for events. When milk spoils unexpectedly, when a child falls suddenly ill, when livestock behave strangely, these entities provide a cause that makes sense within your worldview. This isn't separate from your Christian faith, but interwoven with it. The local priest might bless fields against crop-destroying spirits. Church bells drive away storm demons. Saints intercede against specific illnesses or protect particular professions. The natural and supernatural aren't distinct categories, but a continuous spectrum of increasingly subtle forces affecting daily life. Your understanding of death is both more immediate and more integrated into life than the modern experience. You've likely witnessed numerous deaths, family members, neighbors, even strangers during plague times. The process is familiar rather than clinical, occurring at home rather than in institutions. The body is prepared for burial by family, not professionals. Grief is expressed through established rituals that provide structure for emotional processing. The afterlife is vividly real to you, not an abstract concept. Heaven, hell, and purgatory exist as actual places where souls experience reward, punishment, or purification. Your actions in life directly affect your destination and experience after death. This belief system profoundly shapes your decisions, your tolerance for present suffering, your understanding of justice. The promise of eventual heavenly reward makes the hardships of peasant existence more bearable. One of the strangest survival practices might be the medieval approach to water. Despite its essential nature, water is often viewed with suspicion. Wells and springs have guardians or spirits that must be respected with small offerings. Certain bodies of water are believed to have healing properties for specific ailments. Others are considered dangerous beyond their physical properties, places where malevolent beings dwell or where the boundaries between worlds grow thin. Rivers mark boundaries, not just geographically but often legally, separating parishes, manors, or jurisdictions. Crossing water sometimes involves ritual significance, a symbolic washing away of the old, an entry into new territory both physical and metaphysical. Bridges, as human interventions in these natural boundaries, often become sites of particular importance. Places where tolls are collected, where criminals are executed, where protective charms are placed. Your relationship with wildlife is complex. Some animals are resources, hunted for food or trapped for fur. Others are threats to crops or livestock. Still others are omens or messengers, their appearance signifying good or ill fortune. Ravens and crows gather at execution sites, seeming to connect the worlds of the living and the dead. Swallows return with spring, bringing hope and renewal. Wolves symbolize winter's dangers. These associations aren't merely poetic, but provide a kind of emotional guidance through the natural cycles that dominate your life. The strangest aspect of medieval survival might be the acceptance of a level of risk that modern society considers unacceptable. You walk narrow paths along steep hillsides. You work with sharp tools and unpredictable animals. You eat foods of uncertain safety. You drink water of unknown quality. You treat wounds with whatever is available. You give birth without medical assistance. Most of these risks aren't taken by choice, but by necessity. There are simply no safer alternatives available to you. This constant exposure to risk creates a different relationship with danger than that of safety-conscious modern people. You're more aware of potential hazards, more skilled at navigating them, more accepting of the inevitable injuries and occasional deaths that result. This isn't fatalism, but practicality. Safety as a primary value is a luxury your world cannot afford. Your hands tell your life story. They're calloused from constant labor, with dirt ground into the skin that never completely washes out. Nails are broken, cuticles torn. Scars mark where tools slipped or materials broke unexpectedly. The skin is weathered, aged beyond your years, by exposure to sun, wind, and harsh conditions. To modern eyes, they would appear damaged, in need of treatment and protection. To you, they're simply the necessary condition of survival, functional tools that enable the work that keeps you alive. Your feet, if you're fortunate enough to have shoes for part of the year, develop thick calluses during barefoot seasons. These natural soles provide protection similar to leather, allowing you to walk comfortably on surfaces that would be painful to modern feet. In winter, chilblains, painful inflammation from repeated cold exposure, are common. Fungal infections spread easily in the damp conditions of shared living quarters. Your digestive system adapts to a diet that would cause significant distress to modern humans. The heavy, often coarse bread. The fermented foods with active bacterial cultures. The occasional slightly spoiled meat or dairy consumed because wasting food means potential starvation. Your gut microbiome processes these challenges, sometimes successfully, sometimes resulting in chronic digestive issues that you simply live with as part of normal existence. The strangest survival practice might be the medieval approach to childbirth and infant care. Women give birth attended by other women, mothers, sisters, neighbors with experience rather than formal training. Pain relief consists of perhaps some alcohol or herbal preparations of varying effectiveness. Many traditional birthing positions use gravity to assist the process, squatting, kneeling, or using special birth chairs, rather than the modern practice of lying flat. Infants are swaddled tightly, partly for warmth, partly in the belief that it helps limbs grow straight. They might be given small amounts of alcohol to quiet crying or induce sleep. Wet nurses are used by wealthy families, but also sometimes by working women who cannot interrupt their labor to breastfeed. Teething pain is treated with various substances rubbed on the gums, some soothing, honey, some potentially harmful, lead preparations. These practices reflect both practical adaptations to harsh conditions and the limited understanding of infant development. The concept of childhood illness differs fundamentally. Some conditions now considered problematic were viewed as normal developmental stages or even beneficial. Mild childhood diseases were seen as necessary purging of harmful elements from the body. Convulsions might be interpreted as spiritual experiences rather than medical emergencies. The high child mortality rate creates a painful familiarity with loss that shapes family dynamics and emotional attachments. Your experience of pain is different, not physiologically but culturally. Without effective analgesics for most conditions, pain is an expected part of existence. Various cultural practices help manage it: distraction, community support, religious framing, herbal remedies of limited effectiveness. The modern expectation of pain-free living would seem strange and unrealistic. One of the weirdest survival practices might be the medieval approach to mental health. What we now recognize as depression, anxiety, psychosis, or other conditions were understood through different frameworks: humoral imbalances, spiritual afflictions, character weaknesses, or, in some cases, special connections to the divine. Treatments ranged from dietary adjustments to pilgrimages to exorcism, depending on the perceived cause. Some individuals with mental differences found valued social roles. The holy fool might speak truths others feared to utter. The melancholic might create beautiful religious art or poetry. The person with what might now be diagnosed as obsessive-compulsive traits might excel at detailed craft work or scrupulous religious observance. While not all mental health conditions found such accommodations, the pre-industrial society sometimes offered niches for neurodiversity that modern medicalized approaches have eliminated. The medieval approach to learning differs fundamentally from modern education. Knowledge is transmitted primarily through apprenticeship, watching, then assisting, then practicing under supervision, then independent work. This applies to everything from blacksmithing to midwifery to farming techniques. Abstract concepts are taught through stories, proverbs, songs, memorable forms that can be easily retained and recalled when needed. For the small minority who receive formal education, primarily boys destined for the church, learning is heavily focused on memorization. Texts are precious, rarely owned personally. Students might share a single book, memorizing passages by recitation. This creates a different relationship with information than the modern expectation of constant reference access. What you know must be carried in your mind, always available without external aids. Your concept of community responsibility would seem simultaneously harsher and more supportive than modern approaches. The village collectively ensures basic survival for members who cannot provide for themselves: the elderly, orphans, the disabled. But this support comes with strict expectations of whatever contribution is possible. Everyone must add something to the community according to their capacity. Those who can work but refuse risk being driven out entirely, as they threaten the precarious survival of the whole. Crime and punishment operate on similar principles. Theft, particularly of food or essential items, might be harshly punished because it endangers others' survival. Yet the understanding of necessity might mitigate consequences. Stealing because your children are starving is viewed differently than stealing for personal gain. Justice aims less at abstract principles and more at maintaining the functional integrity of the community. One of the strangest aspects of medieval survival is the community management of resources that modern economies treat as individual property. Grazing rights on common land are carefully allocated. Forest access for gathering firewood or foraging is regulated by custom and Lord's law. Gleaning rights, the collection of leftover grain after harvest, are reserved for the most vulnerable, community members. These systems acknowledge the fundamentally interdependent nature of survival, balancing individual needs against collective sustainability. Your understanding of the natural world combines practical knowledge, religious teaching, and folklore in ways that don't separate observation from meaning. Plants aren't just sources of food or medicine, but carriers of symbolic significance that connects them to specific uses. The oak's strength makes it appropriate for building structures that need to last. St. John's wort, blooming around the Saint's feast day in late June, treats melancholy associated with darkness as the plant appears when light is strongest. This symbolic thinking extends to the human body. Physical characteristics are read as indicators of temperament or moral quality. Red hair might suggest a hot-tempered nature. A birthmark might be interpreted as a sign from God or a witch's mark, depending on its location and appearance. These aren't just superstitions, but part of a coherent system for understanding the patterns and meanings perceived in the world. Time itself is experienced differently. Without mechanical clocks, time is elastic, measured by tasks completed, rather than minutes passed. As long as it takes to milk a cow, or while the bread is baking, are more relevant time units than hours. Seasons expand and contract depending on weather conditions rather than calendar dates. This task-based temporality creates a different relationship with work and productivity than the strict chronological time of industrial and post-industrial societies. Perhaps the most alien aspect of medieval peasant existence is its fundamental precariousness combined with its strange stability. Your life hangs constantly on the edge of disaster. A bad harvest, a serious injury, an outbreak of disease could push you from subsistence to starvation. Yet, the social structures, the patterns of work and community, the basic technology, remain remarkably constant across generations. Your grandparents' lives were not dramatically different from your own, nor will your grandchildren's be from yours, barring catastrophic disruption. This creates a paradoxical relationship with change. Innovation is approached cautiously because failed experiments can be fatal in a subsistence economy. Yet adaptations that prove beneficial spread relatively quickly through necessity-driven networks. New crops, tools, or techniques that demonstrably improve survival chances are adopted despite general conservatism. This isn't the rapid innovation of modern capitalism, but a slow, community-tested evolution of practices. Your understanding of happiness differs from modern conceptions. It's found not in self-actualization or personal achievement, but in successful navigation of necessity. A good harvest, healthy children, a roof that doesn't leak, enough food stored for winter. These are the markers of a good life. Moments of joy come in community celebrations, in the simple pleasures of song and story, around the fire in the satisfaction of skillful work completed well. The strangest aspect of medieval peasant survival might be its success despite its hardships. For all the disease, hunger, and danger, communities persisted. Children were born, grew, worked, married, had their own children. Fields were planted, harvested, planted again. Houses were built, maintained, rebuilt when necessary. Innovation happened slowly but steadily. Human creativity and adaptability flourished even in the harshest conditions. This resilience itself might be the most alien concept to modern observers accustomed to greater comfort, but perhaps less confident in their basic survival skills. As night fully descends on your medieval village, the darkness is profound in a way modern humans rarely experience. No streetlights, no headlights, no glow from windows or electronic devices. Just the occasional flicker of a rushlights behind shuttered windows, the dim glow of banked fires, perhaps the light of the moon, and stars when the sky is clear. This darkness shapes your relationship with night, a time when work mostly ceases, when the boundary between the natural and supernatural seems thinner, when the community draws inward for protection and rest. Your day is ending as it began, on the straw mattress that will gradually accumulate more insects, more dirt, more wear, until it's eventually replaced. Your body aches from labor. Your stomach is never quite full. Your skin is weathered, your hands calloused, your teeth wearing down. By modern standards, your life is incredibly hard, unimaginably precarious. Yet it's the only life you know, shared with a community who faces the same challenges, guided by traditions that have enabled survival for generations before you. You'll wake tomorrow to much the same: the endless cycle of agricultural labor, the constant vigilance against hunger, the community interdependence that is both support and obligation. The weirdest thing about peasant survival isn't any single practice, but the totality of an existence so different from modern experience that its everyday reality now seems almost incomprehensibly alien. Yet this was the normal human condition for centuries, the background against which most of our ancestors lived their entire lives. And with that knowledge, perhaps you can now drift off to sleep, grateful for the comforts of your modern bed, your temperature-controlled room, your full stomach, your relatively healthy body. The medieval peasants' survival strategies seem strange to us now precisely because we have the luxury of forgetting the precariousness that necessitated them. Sleep well, knowing that the hard-earned wisdom of those peasant ancestors helped create the world that allows you such peaceful rest. But there is more to tell of these strange survival practices, more textures of a life so different from your own. The medieval peasant's day continues through the seasons, through the years, through generations of accumulated wisdom and necessity. Let us delve deeper into this world, this reality that shaped so much of human existence. The spring planting carries its own peculiar rituals. You might bury an egg in the first furrow, a symbol of fertility and rebirth that predates your Christian faith but has been absorbed into it. The priest blesses the seeds before they go into the ground, walking the boundaries of the fields in a procession that reinforces both spiritual protection and property lines. These aren't separate concerns in your world. The physical and metaphysical are always intertwined. Your plow itself is a communal investment. Few families own one outright. Instead, the village shares these expensive implements, creating complex schedules of use rights and maintenance obligations. The plow team, often 6 or 8 oxen, might also be assembled from multiple households, each contributing an animal to the collective effort. This cooperation isn't charity but survival strategy. No single family can manage alone. The weirdest aspect of plowing might be the gendered division of labor. Men typically guide the plow while women follow, breaking up clods of earth that the plow misses. This division isn't arbitrary, but based on strength requirements and the need for someone to handle the oxen, which respond better to familiar handlers. Still, when necessity demands, these gender roles flex. A widow might plow her own strips if she has no sons or brothers to assist. A husband might take over women's work if his wife is in childbed or ill. Survival always trumps social norms. Your diet follows strict seasonal patterns that would seem alien to anyone, accustomed to year-round availability of foods. Early spring is the hungry time, when stored foods run low but new growth has barely begun. You might subsist on the last of the winter stores: dried beans, hard cheese, bread made from the bottom of the flour barrel where weevils and dirt collect. You might gather wild foods that appear before cultivated crops: nettles, dandelions, wild garlic, early mushrooms after spring rains. These spring foraging practices carry strange taboos and superstitions. Some mushrooms must be gathered only at certain phases of the moon. Some plants should be harvested with silver blades rather than iron. Others require specific prayers or offerings before taking them. These aren't mere superstitions to you, but practical knowledge passed down through generations, encoding observations about when plants are most potent or least likely to cause harm. Water itself is managed through community systems that modern individualism would find difficult to comprehend. Wells are communal property, maintained by collective labor. Their use follows unwritten but strict protocols. Drawing water for drinking takes precedence over water for washing or for animals. The first water of the day is considered purest and might be reserved for household use, while later drawings go to livestock or cleaning. Rivers and streams support their own complex use rights. Upstream users must consider downstream needs. Washing is done below drinking collection points. Tanning, fulling, and other polluting activities occur furthest downstream. These arrangements aren't enforced by written law, but by community standards maintained through generations of practical experience with waterborne disease and resource limitation. Summer brings new survival practices. The sun that ripens crops also threatens field workers with heat stroke and dehydration. You work in the coolest hours, very early morning and evening, resting during the hottest part of the day when possible. Head coverings are universal, not just for modesty, but for protection. Men's wide-brimmed hats and women's veils shield from sunburn that could disable a worker during crucial harvest periods. Your summer clothing might seem strange by modern standards. Despite the heat, you don't expose much skin. Long sleeves protect from sun, scratches, and biting insects. Layers can be adjusted, with outer garments removed during heavy labor, then replaced when sweat threatens to chill the body during rest periods. Linen, if you're fortunate enough to have it, provides better summer comfort than wool. But many peasants wear the same wool garments year-round, sweating through summer to ensure warmth in winter. The strangest summer survival practice might be managing the community grain reserves. Even in times of relative plenty, a portion of the harvest is set aside in parish storage. This isn't just for winter, but for planting the following spring. The temptation to consume these reserves during the hungry time must be resisted through community pressure and sometimes physical security. Families who have exhausted their personal stores might receive emergency rations from these communal supplies, but always with the understanding that this creates a debt to be repaid from their next harvest. Vermin control occupies surprising amounts of your time and energy. Rats and mice consume stored grain. Insects infest flour and dried foods. Birds steal seeds from newly planted fields. You develop countermeasures for each threat. Cats for rodents, sealed containers for stored foods, scarecrows, and bird-scaring devices for fields. Children earn their keep partly through vermin control, spending hours frightening birds away from ripening crops or hunting for rats in storage areas. The most alien aspect of summer might be its danger. Modern people associate summer with vacation, relaxation, freedom. For you, it's a period of intensive labor when a few weeks of bad weather can mean starvation months later. Every day of ripening crops brings both hope and anxiety. A hailstorm can destroy a grain field in minutes. A week of rain at the wrong time can cause fungal diseases that render the harvest inedible. These aren't abstract concerns, but constant, nagging worries that underlie every summer day. Harvest time brings its own weird practices. You leave a small portion of grain standing in the field, a deliberate offering to ensure future fertility. Different explanations exist for this practice. The church might sanction it as charity, ensuring gleaners have something to collect. Older traditions speak of offerings to field spirits or to birds that will otherwise take more through the year. The practical result is the same: a small sacrifice from current plenty to ensure future abundance. The harvest itself follows rigid social protocols. Workers are arranged by skill level and social standing. Those who can bind sheaves quickly and efficiently earn higher status than those who merely gather. The Lord's strips are harvested first, Then individual families work their own scattered strips, often with reciprocal labor exchanges. A family whose member is ill might receive community help with the understanding that they'll repay this assistance when able. Celebration punctuates the end of harvest, a rare period when food is truly abundant. The harvest feast includes the first bread from new grain, ceremonially broken and shared by the community. Beer flows more freely than at any other time of year. Music, dancing, and games create a brief period of revelry before the work of winter. Preparation begins. These celebrations aren't just recreation, but community bonding that reinforces the mutual aid necessary for survival. Autumn brings yet another set of survival practices. Preservation techniques that would seem strange or even dangerous by modern food safety standards become essential. Fruits are dried on racks or boiled into thick preserves with honey if available. Vegetables are fermented in earthenware crocks, creating sauerkraut, pickled beets, and other acid-preserved foods. Meat from autumn slaughter is salted, smoked, or turned into sausages filled with grain and herbs to extend the precious protein. The slaughter itself follows strict timing aligned with weather and religious calendar. Animals are killed after the first hard frost when natural cooling aids preservation, but before deep winter makes outdoor work difficult. This timing often corresponds with Martinmas, November 11th, creating a connection between practical necessity and religious observance. Nothing is wasted. Blood becomes sausage. Organs are consumed quickly as they spoil first. Fat is rendered for cooking, lighting, and waterproofing. Bones make tools and broth. Hides become leather. Winter brings the strangest survival strategies of all. The concept of hibernating isn't just for animals. Human activity slows, calories are conserved, and communities turn inward. Many peasants actually gain weight before winter, a purposeful strategy to create reserves for the lean months ahead. This isn't gluttony, but survival planning. The modern value placed on consistent leanness would seem dangerously foolish. Your winter sleeping arrangements would alarm modern health officials. Family members sleep close together for warmth, often with multiple people sharing the same bed regardless of age or gender. In the coldest regions, animals might be brought into the house, their body heat providing crucial warmth. The air is stuffy, the smells strong, but the alternative, freezing, is worse. Privacy is sacrificed for survival. Light becomes precious in winter. Days shorten dramatically in northern Europe, leaving long hours of darkness. You rise with the sun and effectively end most work at sunset. Candles and rushlights are used sparingly, saved for essential tasks that cannot wait for daylight. This creates a different relationship with darkness than modern humans experience. You become accustomed to moving through familiar spaces by touch and memory. Conversations happen in dim firelight. Stories are told by voice alone, not read from books. Winter brings its own food strategies. Preserved meats and vegetables from autumn form the base of your diet. These are supplemented by whatever can be hunted or gathered. Rabbits snared in the snow, winter fish caught through ice holes, nuts stored by squirrels and reclaimed by human foragers. In desperate times, tree bark might be ground and added to flour to create filling if barely palatable bread. The texture and flavor of winter food would be almost unrecognizable to the modern palate. Strongly preserved, often slightly spoiled, heavily salted or fermented. The weirdest winter practice might be the careful rationing of food stores. You don't simply eat until satisfied. Each day's portion is carefully measured, calculated to last until spring brings new growth. This isn't modern dieting for appearance, but life or death resource management. Families check their stores regularly, adjusting daily rations as needed. If supplies dwindle too quickly, portions are reduced further. Children receive priority, followed by working adults whose labor will be needed in spring. The elderly sometimes voluntarily reduce their own consumption to ensure the family's survival. Disease takes on different patterns in winter. The close quarters and limited ventilation spread respiratory infections rapidly. What modern people would recognize as influenza, pneumonia, or tuberculosis moves through communities, typically claiming the very young, the elderly, and those already weakened by poor nutrition. These aren't seen as contagious in the modern sense, but as imbalances caused by winter conditions or as divine testing. The treatment of winter illness relies heavily on what limited resources are available. Herbal teas made from stored dried plants provide some relief. Poultices of mustard seed or other warming substances are applied to congested chests. The ill are kept warm, sometimes by being buried, up to their necks in grain stores which provide both warmth and humidity for easier breathing. Many of these treatments have some therapeutic benefit, though not for the reasons believed at the time. Your winter clothing reveals the ingenuity of resource-limited survival. Multiple layers of the same basic garments provide adjustable insulation. Straw might be stuffed between layers for additional warmth. Feet are wrapped in strips of cloth before shoes are put on, creating primitive socks. Hands are protected by mittens rather than gloves. A single chamber for all fingers conserves more heat than separate finger coverings. Head coverings are never removed outdoors, as the substantial heat loss through the scalp is intuitively understood, if not scientifically explained. The strangest aspect of winter survival might be the psychological adaptation to a period of enforced inactivity and close confinement with the same small group of people. Modern humans experience cabin fever after a few snow days. Medieval peasants endured months of limited space, limited light, limited occupation, and limited social contact beyond their immediate household. This created social mechanisms for managing conflict, structured activities for maintaining mental health, and cultural practices that gave meaning to this difficult period. Storytelling takes on heightened importance during winter evenings. Tales are repeated year after year, gaining embellishments and local references but maintaining core elements that connect listeners to both their immediate community and their broader cultural heritage. These aren't just entertainment, but instruction, preserving important knowledge in memorable form, teaching moral lessons relevant to community survival, and providing shared references that strengthen group identity. Winter crafts serve both practical and psychological purposes. Women spin and weave by firelight, turning raw fibers into essential textiles. Men repair tools, carve wooden implements, or work leather for the coming year's needs. These activities provide necessary goods but also purpose during a time when agricultural work is impossible. The steady rhythm of repetitive handwork becomes meditative, a way to pass long, dark hours productively while conserving energy. The religious observances of winter, particularly Christmas and its surrounding celebrations, serve crucial social and psychological functions. They break the monotony of winter, provide community gatherings during an otherwise isolated time, and offer hope of renewal during the darkest period of the year. The Yule log, the greenery brought indoors, the feast from carefully saved provisions, all represent the promise that light and growth will return, that the community will survive another winter. Spring's return brings its own strange transition. Your body, adapted to winter's limited diet and reduced activity, must readjust to increased labor demands while food stores are at their lowest. This creates a dangerous period when energy expenditure necessarily exceeds caloric intake. You're weakest precisely when the greatest physical effort is required. This reality shapes spring work patterns, a gradual increase in labor as new food sources become available, careful allocation of tasks based on individual strength, and community support for households whose winter rations have run dangerously low. Throughout all seasons, one of the strangest aspects of medieval survival is its essentially communal nature. The modern concept of the self-sufficient individual would seem not just impossible, but actively dangerous. No single person or even nuclear family can manage all the tasks necessary for survival. Labor is exchanged, resources are shared, though not equally. Knowledge is collective. Even the most basic activities, plowing, house building, childbirth, dying, require community involvement. This interdependence creates both security and obligation. You cannot be completely destitute while part of a functioning community. Neither can you isolate yourself from community demands. Your time, your labor, your resources, even your private behaviors are subject to collective interest because they affect collective survival. Privacy is a luxury that barely exists, replaced by complex social rules about what can be acknowledged or discussed openly. Perhaps the strangest psychological aspect of medieval peasant existence is its relationship with hope and expectation. Modern people generally expect improvement in technology, in standard of living, in social conditions. Medieval peasants expected continuity. A good life meant repeating the patterns of previous generations, perhaps with slightly more food security, healthier children, a roof that leaked less. Innovation happened, but slowly, cautiously, tested against the life or death requirements of subsistence agriculture. This created a temporal perspective very different from modern experience. The past wasn't a primitive time to be improved upon, but a source of tested wisdom to be maintained. The future wasn't a potential utopia of progress, but ideally a stable continuation of sustainable patterns. Change was as likely to be for the worse as for the better. A new lord with higher demands, a period of warfare that disrupted planting, a succession of bad weather years. The best that could be hoped for was enough of everything. Enough food, enough health, enough community. Stability to survive another year. The weird survivalism of medieval peasant existence reveals itself most clearly in its relationship with abundance. Modern consumption seeks more possessions, more experiences, more options. The peasant economy sought enough. Having two of something when one would suffice represented wasted resources that could have been converted to something else, equally necessary. Enough food to last until the next harvest. Enough textile to clothe the family with some left for essential household items. Enough firewood to cook and provide minimal warmth. This enough economy created different values around material possessions. Objects were valued for their utility, durability, and repairability rather than novelty or status. A cooking pot might be used for generations, repaired repeatedly, and considered a valuable inheritance. Clothing was assessed by warmth, protection, and durability rather than fashion or personal expression. These values weren't simply material necessity, but became deeply embedded in the cultural understanding of what constituted proper relationship with the physical world. The strangest aspect of medieval belief might be its embrace of paradox. The natural world was simultaneously divine creation, dwelling place of malevolent spirits, source of sustenance, and constant threat. Human beings were both inherently sinful and made in God's image. Authority figures deserved respect, but were known to be flawed and sometimes corrupt. These contradictions weren't intellectual problems to be resolved, but the basic conditions of existence, accepted as part of a world too complex for human comprehension. This comfort with paradox extended to the supernatural. The boundary between natural and supernatural wasn't clear or fixed. Angels, demons, saints, fairies, ghosts, and nature spirits all populated the same conceptual space, differentiated more by their intentions toward humans than by their ontological status. A healing might come from a saint's intervention, a wise woman's herbal knowledge, or simply the body's natural recovery. And all three explanations could be simultaneously true. Your understanding of your own body differs fundamentally from modern self-conception. You don't think of yourself as owning your body, as modern people might. Instead, your body is part of the divine creation, entrusted to your stewardship but ultimately belonging to God. This creates different relationships with physical processes like illness, aging, and death. These aren't primarily medical events, but spiritual ones, meaningful rather than random, purposeful rather than merely biological. The strangest medical treatments reflect this integrated understanding of physical and spiritual. Prayer and poultice are applied together, neither considered complete without the other. Pilgrimage serves both medical and spiritual purposes, the journey itself providing physical therapy through changed air, diet, and movement, while the sacred destination offers spiritual healing. Confession of sins might be prescribed alongside herbal remedies, addressing both potential causes of illness. Your awareness of physical processes is both more and less acute than modern bodily consciousness. You're intimately familiar with the smell of human waste, the texture of different bodily secretions, the stages of decomposition in both animals and humans. These aren't disgusting, but simply part of the physical world you inhabit. Yet you lack the vocabulary and conceptual framework to describe many internal processes that modern medicine has named and categorized. Perhaps the weirdest survival practice is the medieval approach to mental and emotional distress. What modern psychiatry would diagnose as depression might be understood as demonic oppression, as divine testing like that experienced by biblical Job, or simply as a natural melancholic temperament requiring dietary adjustments. Treatments might include confession, pilgrimage, changes in food, specialized prayers, or community support, a holistic approach that addressed spiritual, physical, and social dimensions simultaneously. The most alien aspect of this approach is its integration of the sufferer within community, rather than isolation in specialized treatment facilities. The person experiencing mental distress remained part of village life, with accommodations made for their condition but without complete removal from normal activities. This created both support systems and potential for mistreatment, depending on the specific community and the nature of the condition, but it maintained the essential social connections that medieval survival required. Your concept of economics would be unrecognizable to modern capitalism. Value isn't primarily expressed in monetary terms, but in use value, labor exchange, and obligational relationships. A day's labor might be paid with a share of the resulting product, with the promise of reciprocal help later, or with a complex mixture of goods, services, and social capital. Money exists, but primarily for dealings with outsiders, merchants, tax collectors, the occasional traveler, rather than within the village economy. The weirdest economic practice might be the gift economy that operates alongside more utilitarian exchanges. Strategic giving creates obligations that can be called upon later. A gift given is a connection established, a potential resource in hard times. These aren't purely altruistic acts, but survival strategies that create resilient networks of mutual obligation. The modern separation of economic and social relationships would seem dangerously unstable. Your relationship with animals combines utilitarian practicality with a strange intimacy. Livestock live in close proximity, sometimes sharing human dwelling, space. You know their individual behaviors, their lineages, their peculiarities. You speak to them, not as modern pet owners might, but as working partners in survival. When they're eventually slaughtered, there's no sentimentality about their individual personalities, but there is respect for their contribution to human life, sometimes expressed in ritualized thanks. Wild animals occupy a different conceptual space, simultaneously resources, competitors, omens, and sometimes embodiments of supernatural forces. A wolf might be a dangerous predator taking valuable livestock, a symbol of winter's hunger, a potential source of useful fur, or a manifestation of wild forces at the boundary of human control. These aren't separate interpretations, but overlapping aspects of the same entity. The strangest aspect of medieval animal husbandry might be its integration with human social structures. Animals have hierarchies recognized and managed by their human keepers. They have roles and responsibilities within the economic system. They're subject to community regulation. A dangerous bull or biting dog might be evaluated by village elders and ordered destroyed if it threatens collective safety. Their welfare is considered not from modern ethical concerns about suffering, but from practical assessment of their economic value. Your relationship with plants is equally complex. Crops aren't just food sources, but living entities with their own requirements and relationships. You speak to them, not because you believe they understand as humans do, but because verbal expression helps codify the close observation that effective cultivation requires. You note their progress daily, interpreting small changes as indicators of health, disease, or readiness for harvest. The strangest plant-related practice might be the attribution of agency to crops. When disease strikes or yields are low, you might understand this as the plant hiding its fertility or withholding its bounty, rather than as the result of impersonal biological or environmental factors. This creates a relationship of negotiation rather than simple management. Rituals, offerings, and verbal appeals are as much part of agriculture as physical labor and practical knowledge. Wild plants exist in their own category, neither fully domesticated nor completely independent of human influence. The forests and hedgerows where gathering occurs aren't pristine wilderness, but managed landscapes shaped by generations of human interaction. You harvest with both practical and ritual considerations, taking what's needed while ensuring future growth through selective gathering, replanting, and sometimes deliberate cultivation of particularly useful wild species. The weirdest aspect of your technology might be its longevity. Tools aren't regularly replaced, but maintained, repaired, and passed down through generations. A plow, a spinning wheel, a loom might be used for a century or more, with parts replaced as needed, but the core structure remaining. This creates a different relationship with technological objects. They're not temporary or disposable, but permanent parts of the community's resource base. Innovation happens within this framework of continuity. New techniques are adopted cautiously, tested against the life or death requirements of subsistence. A slightly different weaving pattern that creates more durable cloth, a minor adjustment to plowing technique that increases yield, a new way of stacking hay that reduces spoilage. These small improvements accumulate over generations, creating slow but significant technological evolution without the disruptive replacement that characterizes modern innovation cycles. Perhaps the strangest technological practice is the ritualization of process that modern people would consider purely practical. The first use of a new tool might include prayers, offerings, or special handling. Certain craftwork might require specific states of ritual purity, abstinence from certain foods or activities before particularly important or difficult tasks. These practices aren't separate from technical knowledge but integrated with it, creating a holistic approach to production. Your legal system combines formal structures imposed by lord and church with informal community regulation. Many disputes never reach official adjudication but are resolved through community pressure, negotiation mediated by elders, or ritualized reconciliation. The shame of community disapproval is often more effective than formal punishment. Being ostracized from the networks of mutual aid that make survival possible is a threatening prospect that encourages compliance with community standards. The weirdest aspect of medieval justice might be its flexibility and personalization. Punishment is adjusted based not just on the offense, but on the offender's history, reputation, and role in the community. A first-time thief from a generally reliable family might receive a light sentence with the understanding that family members will ensure no repetition. A habitual troublemaker might face harsher consequences for an identical crime. This isn't seen as unfair, but as practical recognition of different risk levels to community welfare. Your understanding of land isn't based primarily on individual ownership, but on complex use rights that overlap and change seasonally. The same piece of ground might be part of the crop rotation system during growing season, common grazing land after harvest, and subject to gleaning rights at specific times. These arrangements aren't written down but maintained through community memory and regular boundary marking rituals like beating the bounds, walking the parish perimeter annually to reinforce shared knowledge of where boundaries lie. The strangest land management practice might be the deliberate maintenance of marginal areas, not quite cultivated, not quite wild, that serve as emergency resources. Village edges, pond margins, minor waterways, and other transition zones are managed to support useful plants and animals that can be harvested in times of scarcity. These aren't primary food sources, but survival insurance that receives just enough human attention to remain productive without requiring the intensive labor of fully cultivated fields. Water management reveals similar community-based approaches. Drainage ditches, small dams, and channels are maintained by collective labor, often under the direction of experienced elders who carry the knowledge of how water flow affects multiple users across seasons. These systems evolve over generations, adapting to changing conditions but maintaining core principles of shared access and responsibility. The weirdest aspect of community water management might be its ritual dimensions. Sources believed to have healing properties receive special care and access protocols. Seasonal blessings of wells and streams combine practical inspection of water quality with spiritual protection. Offerings to water sources, coins, pins, cloth strips, acknowledge the essential nature of this resource while creating psychological relationship with something too important to be taken for granted. Your relationship with waste would horrify modern sanitation engineers while appearing perfectly logical within the constraints of your existence. Nothing that can possibly be reused is discarded. Food scraps go to animals or compost. Human waste becomes fertilizer. Broken tools provide materials for new ones. Worn-out textiles become progressively smaller items until the last scraps serve as tinder or wound dressings. The concept of something being useless simply doesn't exist in a subsistence economy. The midden heap behind each house, the accumulated pile of truly unusable material, is both practical disposal site and valuable resource. Archaeological examination of these middens reveals the material reality of medieval life more accurately than written records, which often focus on exceptional rather than everyday experience. Future generations will mine these middens for useful materials. Bits of metal, partially decomposed. Organics that improve poor soil. Even building material when mixed with clay for wattle and daub construction. The strangest personal care practices reveal the gap between medieval and modern concepts of health and comfort. Bathing follows seasonal patterns rather than regular schedules. Full immersion might happen a few times yearly, often associated with religious festivals that symbolically connect physical and spiritual cleansing. More frequent spot cleaning focuses on visible areas, face, hands, feet, using minimal water and no soap, which is expensive and reserved for textile production rather than personal hygiene. Hair care involves practices that would seem bizarre by modern standards. Lice infestations are managed rather than eliminated, with regular combing to reduce populations, but the acceptance that complete eradication is impossible. Hair is covered not primarily for modesty, but for practical protection from dirt, parasites, sun, and the elements. Washing is infrequent, with various herbal rinses used to reduce odor and discourage parasites rather than to clean in the modern sense. The weirdest aspect of medieval personal care might be its social nature. Delousing is a communal activity, with family members or friends removing parasites from each other's hair and clothing. This isn't considered disgusting, but is a normal social interaction that combines practical necessity with the human need for physical contact and care. Children are taught these skills early, participating in family care routines as soon as they have the necessary dexterity. Your approach to beauty and appearance differs fundamentally from modern aesthetics. Physical attractiveness is assessed, primarily through indicators of health and capability. Clear skin suggesting freedom from disease, strong teeth for proper nutrition, physical strength for labor, regular features suggesting balanced humors. Cosmetic modifications are minimal and focused on enhancing these markers of health rather than artificial embellishment. The strangest beauty practice might be the use of dangerous substances to achieve cultural ideals. Lead-based preparations lighten skin, creating the pale complexion associated with indoor life and thus higher social status. Belladonna dilates pupils, creating the wide-eyed look considered attractive but risking vision damage. These aren't common among peasants, who have neither resources nor practical use for such modifications, but their existence in the broader culture shows the universal human willingness to risk health for beauty. Your understanding of childhood shapes practices that would seem alien to modern parenting. Children are valued not primarily as individuals, to be nurtured and developed according to their unique potential, but as necessary contributors to family survival and eventual support for aging parents. Their training focuses on practical skills rather than abstract knowledge, on conformity to community expectations rather than self-expression, on the ability to function effectively within established social structures rather than innovation or independence. The weirdest parenting practice might be the deliberate hardening of children against the physical and emotional challenges of peasant existence. Crying is discouraged early. Physical discomfort is treated as normal rather than something to be immediately alleviated. Emotional resilience is developed through incremental exposure to difficult realities, death, injury, scarcity, rather than protection from these aspects of life. This isn't cruelty, but practical preparation for the world they must survive. Your approach to death creates some of the strangest practices by modern standards. The dying aren't isolated in institutions, but remain at home, cared for by family, visited by community members. Death happens in the midst of life, often in the shared family bed, witnessed by all ages. The body is prepared for burial by those who knew the person in life, not by professional strangers. Grief is expressed through ritualized behaviors that channel emotion into socially recognized forms rather than private, individual experiences. The strangest death ritual might be the practical redistribution of the deceased's possessions. Clothing is quickly repurposed, not just as an economic necessity, but as a way of incorporating the physical remains of the dead into ongoing community life. To wear a dead parent's cloak isn't morbid, but comforting, a tangible connection to their continuing presence in memory and practical legacy. The modern concept of preserving possessions as memorials would seem wasteful and possibly unhealthy, preventing proper integration of loss. Throughout all these practices runs a common thread: the absolute necessity of adaptation to conditions that cannot be significantly altered. You cannot change the climate, prevent disease through modern medicine, ensure consistent food supply through global trade, or escape the physical realities of a body constantly engaged in necessary labor. Instead, you adapt, physically, socially, psychologically, spiritually, creating a way of life that acknowledges these limitations while finding sustainable patterns within them. The weirdest aspect of this adaptation might be its thoroughness. Every aspect of existence, from daily schedules to family structures, from technologies to belief systems, forms part of an integrated strategy for survival under specific conditions. Change in one area necessitates adjustments throughout the system. This creates both remarkable stability and potential vulnerability when external forces eventually disrupt the balanced patterns of medieval life. As you drift toward sleep, Consider this strange world of your ancestors, not as a primitive past to be pitied or romanticized, but as a complex, finely tuned system of survival under constraints. Their lives were harder than yours in countless ways, yet they contained their own forms of security, connection, and meaning that modern existence sometimes struggles to provide. The weirdest thing about peasant survival isn't any single practice, but the reminder that human beings can adapt to almost any conditions, finding ways to not just exist, but to create communities, raise children, develop technologies, and pass knowledge to future generations, even in the harshest circumstances. Sleep comes now, in your comfortable modern bed, with full stomach and healthy body, with medical care available if needed, with technologies your ancestors couldn't imagine, surrounding you. But something of their resilience remains in your DNA, in your cultural memory, in the basic human capacity to adapt and survive that connects you across centuries to those who lived by these strange practices, who shaped the world that eventually allowed you the luxury of learning about their lives as a curious historical footnote rather than as the urgent reality of your daily existence. And yet, there is still more to tell about these strange medieval lives. As your mind drifts toward sleep, let us explore further the textures and rhythms of this world so different from your own. The medieval peasant's understanding of time itself would seem alien to your modern sensibilities. With no clocks, no watches, no precise measurements, time flows differently. The day is divided not by hours but by the position of the sun, the changing quality of light, the routine tasks that must be performed. Morning begins not at a specific hour, but when there is enough light to work. Evening ends when darkness makes labor impossible. The rhythms of nature dictate the rhythms of human activity with a precision that mechanical timekeeping can only approximate. Church bells provide the only regular time markers in your village. They ring for morning prayers, for midday, for evening vespers. Between these approximate divisions, time stretches and contracts according to the season, the weather, the labor at hand. Summer days are immensely long, winter days desperately short. Your body adjusts to these natural patterns in ways that modern people, with their artificial light and rigid schedules, have largely forgotten. The strangest aspect of this time sense might be its elasticity. You measure duration by tasks rather than minutes. The time it takes to milk a cow. The time needed to walk to the next village, while the bread is baking. These are meaningful units because they connect time directly to physical reality, rather than to abstract measurement. When modern people speak of saving time, the concept would seem peculiar to you. Time isn't something that can be stored or accumulated, but simply the medium in which necessary activities take place. Your concept of age reflects this different relationship with time. Birthdays are rarely celebrated or even remembered precisely. You might know you were born the year of the Great Flood, or 2 harvests after the king's visit, but the exact date holds little significance. Age is measured by life stages rather than years. Infant, child, youth, adult, elder, with transitions marked by capacity for work, physical development, and social role rather than numerical milestones. This creates a strangely fluid approach to childhood and aging. A physically developed 12-year-old who works effectively might be treated as an adult, included in decision-making, considered ready for marriage. A person who in modern terms would be in their 40s but remains strong and productive isn't. Considered middle-aged but simply in their prime. The elder stage begins not at retirement, a concept that doesn't exist, but when physical capacity significantly diminishes, regardless of chronological age. The weirdest aspect of your relationship with aging might be its integration into community structure. Elders don't retire to separate communities or care facilities, but remain central to village life, transitioning to less physically demanding but equally essential roles. They become repositories of agricultural knowledge, arbiters of disputes, teachers of children, keepers of community history. Their value isn't diminished by decreased physical capacity, but shifts to different forms of contribution. Your village functions as an entity almost like a single organism, with different members serving specialized functions while remaining fundamentally interdependent. The blacksmith, the miller, the wise woman with healing knowledge, the shepherd, the weaver, each contributes essential services that others depend upon. This isn't a romanticized vision of harmony, but a practical necessity. The survival skills required for medieval life are too numerous and complex for any individual or even single family to master completely. The strangest aspect of this interdependence might be its enforcement mechanisms. Those who repeatedly fail to fulfill their community obligations face consequences ranging from public shaming to reduced access to communal resources to, in extreme cases, expulsion. This isn't arbitrary cruelty but necessary protection of the collective survival system. A consistently unreliable member endangers everyone by weakening the network of mutual support that sustains the whole. Weather dominates your consciousness in ways that climate-controlled modern environments have largely eliminated. Every aspect of daily life is planned around weather conditions. Not just major agricultural tasks, but cooking, laundry, travel, even social gatherings. You become acutely attuned to subtle signs of weather changes. The particular quality of morning light, the behavior of animals, the feel of the air against your skin, the smell before rain. These aren't poetic observations, but practical information that shapes daily decisions. The weirdest weather-related practice might be the combination of close observation with completely inaccurate explanations. You accurately predict coming storms based on cloud patterns, wind direction, and animal behavior, having learned these correlations through generations of experience. But you explain these patterns through frameworks that modern meteorology would find bizarre. The movements of celestial bodies, the influence of saints' days, the activities of nature spirits, or divine responses to human behavior. Your approach to disaster preparation differs fundamentally from modern emergency management. Without centralized services, rapid transportation, or effective communication systems, each community must be largely self-sufficient in responding to crises. Knowledge of medicinal plants, basic surgical techniques, fire containment, and food preservation isn't specialized but distributed throughout the population. Everyone has at least rudimentary skills in multiple survival domains. The strangest disaster response might be the integration of practical action with religious or magical interventions. When fire threatens, you both form bucket chains and pray to Saint Florian for protection. During drought, you implement water conservation measures while also conducting processions to request divine intervention. These aren't separate or contradictory approaches, but complementary parts of a unified response that addresses both material and spiritual dimensions of crisis. Your village architecture reveals survival adaptations that would seem peculiar by modern standards. Houses are oriented to maximize beneficial elements and minimize harmful ones, capturing winter sun while blocking prevailing storm winds, for example. Buildings cluster together not just for social reasons, but for mutual protection and heat. Conservation. The village layout itself often includes defensive elements. A central green where livestock can be gathered during threats, strategic placement of structures to funnel unwanted visitors along predictable paths. The strangest architectural practice might be the deliberate flexibility of structures. Unlike modern buildings designed for permanence, many medieval structures are built with the expectation of ongoing modification. Walls that can be easily moved to accommodate changing family size. Roof sections that can be quickly repaired after storm damage. Interior arrangements that transform seasonally. The central floor space that serves as work area during day and sleeping area at night. the hearth that moves position between summer and winter to optimize heating and cooling. Food preservation. Techniques reveal ingenious adaptations to life without refrigeration. Beyond the obvious salting, smoking, and drying, you practice more unusual methods. Eggs are preserved in lime water or coated with fat to seal the porous shells, extending usability for months. Butter is submerged in brine in earthenware crocks. Certain fruits are packed in honey, which has natural antibacterial properties. Grains are stored in the smoke path from the hearth, the particulates helping to deter insects. The weirdest preservation. Practice might be the deliberate use of controlled fermentation and beneficial molds. You don't understand the microbiology involved, but generations of observation have taught which color and texture of mold on cheese indicates safety and which signals danger. You know how to create environments that encourage specific fermentation processes while inhibiting harmful ones. These aren't random discoveries, but carefully maintained cultural knowledge passed through practical demonstration and closely guarded recipes. Your approach to fermented beverages serves multiple survival functions beyond mere intoxication. Beer and ale provide safe hydration when water sources are questionable. The alcohol content kills many pathogens, while the brewing process itself requires boiling that eliminates others. The grains used add significant nutritional value, making these drinks a form of liquid bread. Even children consume weak ales as part of normal diet, though the alcohol content is minimal compared to modern commercial beverages. The strangest aspect of medieval brewing might be its gendered nature in many regions. Brewing is often women's work, an extension of cooking and food preservation rather than a specialized craft. The alewife, a woman who brews commercially for the community, is a recognized social role with both status and sometimes suspicion, or attached. The knowledge of brewing techniques passes through female lineages, with daughters learning from mothers and grandmothers through direct participation rather than formal instruction. Your understanding of human reproduction combines accurate observation with complete misconceptions. You know the basic connection between sexual activity and pregnancy, but explain the process through models that have no relationship to modern biology. The male contribution might be understood as a complete miniature human that simply grows in the female body. Or both parents might be thought to contribute seed that combines to form new life. Female monthly cycles are connected to lunar phases, creating symbolic associations between women's bodies and cosmic patterns. The weirdest. Reproductive practice might be the community involvement in what modern people would consider intensely private matters. Fertility is a community concern, not just a personal one. A couple's inability to conceive affects inheritance patterns, available labor, and care for elders, all matters of collective interest. Consequently, older women might provide increasingly specific advice about timing, positions, and practices to enhance conception. Traditional medicines to promote fertility are prepared and administered with community knowledge and support.